still don't know how to do that.
This is live.
I still don't know how to do the Instagram show thing. I think you might have to be invited into that.
Yeah, or you just be verified or have a certain amount of whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
All right, dogs. Over here.
Me and my 800 friends.
All right. Hey guys, what's up? It's Dean. It's always Dean. I don't know who else it would be. And Jesse from Central Athlete. So we're back. We're going to be talking again about nutrition and fitness and exercise. And for the last few weeks, we've been talking about getting into all these subjects in a little bit more depth. We've talked about the first week. We talked about just how does nutrition affect your fitness in general. And then we went a little bit deeper the next week and we talked about how to build muscle and gain weight and what do you need to do in terms of nutrition to do that. And then we talked about losing fat, specifically losing weight, but more specifically losing fat. That the week after that, and then we went into fitness. So we talked about mainly what we covered with fitness was our goals with fitness. If our goals are improving our body composition to build more muscle, is basically what that conversation revolved around. And now this week we're kind of fitting in the final larger puzzle pieces. I won't say we're covering everything that goes into health, but we are covering, I think, what we believe to be the main bases. And that's this week is sleep and stress management. So these are, if you're ignoring these areas, just like if you're ignoring any of the other areas, your fitness or your nutrition, you're not going to see great results. And these are often the areas that are given the least attention. But I don't know about you, based on what you've read and based on your experience, but I think sleep is probably the most important, right? If we're not sleeping, I mean, most of us sleep at least 6 hours a day, but we can do a lot better than that and we can get much better results. Obviously, if we don't sleep for a few weeks, something will be very, very wrong with us. But anyways, sleep and stress management. So that's what we're going to be going over today. We're going to give you a brief overview of the major problems that we see when it comes to sleep and stress management. And then we'll both give you some of our favorite strategies for practicing better sleep and then also practicing stress management. Cool. All right. So sleep. You want to take it away and talk about sleep and I guess what you see as major problems and things that you have to talk about with your clients a lot.
Yeah, I believe this whole subject today is really the not so sexy stuff. People always want a sexy training plan. They want the special meal plan, and they feel like that's it. But really, the deeper you get down this road, you realize that this is where a lot of, like what you said, this is where the puzzle really comes together. And so in my own practice, I would have people who did all the right stuff with training. They would eat the perfect foods, but they wouldn't get the results that they were looking for. So that became a really, really fascinating thing for me to research and investigate. And what it simply comes down to is usually something with sleep or stress. And so as it relates to sleep, is biologically is we have evolved from really hunter-gatherer tribes. And so we would go to bed about 2 hours past dusk, and we would wake up roughly about, depends on the latitude, about 2 hours before the sun would rise. And so, roughly that was around 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. We've evolved to that point. Right now, in today's day and age, the statistics is that 1 out of every 2 people is sleep deprived, and 1 out of every 3 people is in like a critically sleep deprived state, meaning that they are around 6 hours of sleep. About 6 hours of sleep for 14 consecutive days. You have the cognitive abilities, if you are driving a car, as if you were legally intoxicated.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's just a great metaphor for how it begins to affect not just our cognitive abilities, but we're going to go into a lot of the physiological things that happen as well. So really, some of the things that we see as it relates to body composition is that when we have 1 night of poor sleep, which I'm going to define as under 7 hours of sleep, we have a state of insulin resistance. And really what that means is it's like driving with your emergency brake on maybe halfway, is that you're still able to get to where you want to go. It's just going to be a lot more difficult. So the way that your body manages its blood sugar levels is going to be not as effective as it could. So even if you're doing all the right things nutritionally, even if you're doing all the right things training wise, you're gonna have to work that much harder if you're in the sleep debt. Additionally, people tend to eat about 250 calories more if they're under 7 hours of sleep, and they tend to go for worse foods. So that's where we see this kind of like exponential kind of issue with sleep, where people on average can gain about 15 pounds per year of fat mass if they're in a sleep deprived state.
Yeah,
Just sleep alone.
right.
It's pretty significant.
Absolutely. So based on like, so just to stop with this, so kind of my observations based on the people that I train and people that I interact with in the members area, I think that most people aren't getting enough sleep. Statistics back that up, and just based on the people I interact with, but the thing is, I bet you from those half people that think they're not getting enough sleep, I bet you a lot of them think they actually are getting enough sleep, right? They've just gotten to that point where 6 hours is what they get and they're used to that, or they think that they're special and they don't need as much sleep as other people. But that cognitive decline.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanna
Yeah.
piggyback off that. It's very synonymous when you're at the bar and you're like, no, I feel like I'm good to drive home.
Right.
And your buddy who's stone cold sober knows that you're not good to drive, and it's the exact same thing. Is we might feel like we are okay,
Mhm.
but physiologically we're not okay, and it might take somebody else to understand this. So I think that's a really, really, really smart point, is that people's perception of what they sleep. Actually, what I'm wearing right now is something that tracks sleep and tracks heart rate variability. And what we find is, if you're in bed for 8 hours, you're not getting 8 hours of sleep. You might
Right.
be closer to 6.5 to 7 hours. So
Yeah.
your time in bed is a lot different than your time asleep. We're talking, all this literature comes from time asleep, not time in bed.
Mhm.
So I thought that was a really great point that you hit on.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's true, especially what you just said with time in bed does not equal time spent sleeping. More than that, and kind of leading into that, people aren't getting enough sleep and they also have low sleep quality. So, how often are you waking up at night? Are you actually going into REM sleep? Are you getting an equal exposure of non-REM and REM sleep? Are you making sure that you're practicing effective decision making in the hours leading up to bed? So are you watching TV before you go to bed? Are you looking at your phone before you go to bed? Are you getting yourself involved in high stress activities? And all these things can have a negative impact on your sleep. So that's a huge thing, is again, so not enough sleep, but also low quality of sleep. And we'll talk about some things you can do to improve your quality of sleep, and it's actually really easy to do that. And then more than that, I have to talk with people a lot about making sure that if they aren't getting enough sleep, they have to scale back on their exercise accordingly. So if you didn't get enough sleep, if you slept like 5 hours one day, there's no point of you going out and like crushing a weight session. It's going to be awful. You're not going to recover very well from it. It's good to do maybe some restorative stretching, absolutely, maybe go for a walk, but as far as, going out and killing yourself with your workout, your body's not ready for it. So you have to scale back your expectations sometimes based on whether or not you sleep well. And there are a lot of, Jesse has what's called, I see Whoop.
Yep.
Is that what it's called?
It's a Whoop band that measures your resting heart rate, it measures your heart rate variability, and then it measures your time of sleep. So it actually every single day will give you a recovery score.
Okay.
So we have these on
Yeah.
our clients, and I'm able to look at a platform where I can see everybody's sleep, everybody's state of recovery, everybody's heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is really an indication roughly that exercise physiologist feels is very correlative with somebody's internal state of recovery.
Mhm.
And another point to kind of piggyback off Dean is that, if we're low in sleep, is we're not going to be able to progressively overload, which we talked about in previous videos, but that just means that's our ability to do a little bit more than last session or last week, whether that's shorter rest time, a little bit more weight, a little bit more volume. And that's a pertinent part of training, because, if I run every single day, my body becomes more and more efficient at running, which is great if you want to be a marathon runner. It's not so great if you're trying to improve your body composition. Same analogy goes for weightlifting, right? If I do the same workout every single day with the same amount of volume, same amount of weight lifted, my body becomes more efficient to that. So that's where we want to kind of step it up just a little bit. Low on sleep, you're gonna have a very, very, very tough time doing that. Also, muscle endurance. People reach muscle endurance failure a lot quicker when they're asleep. Probably not sure of the exact literature on that. Also VO2 max, people have a lower VO2 max when they're in this chronically sleep deprived state as well.
Yeah, so you're just not gonna do as well, and you're not gonna be able to do as much when it comes to your workouts when you're sleep deprived. All right, so that's kind of an overview of the sleep. Let's talk about stress management. So, and we'll be the first to admit that we also have issues in the stress management department. You know, I mean, I love my job. I love doing this. Sometimes I don't. But I love what I do and I love my mission. But even so, I'm still worried about my business. I'm still worried about, you know, taking care of my employees, and you know, making sure that we're getting enough, we're helping enough people. So even though we've got, I mean, and Jesse, you're doing the same thing with Central Athlete, but you've got employees to take care of. So even though we've got, you know, I don't know, I would do this even if I wasn't getting paid. And someone else was paying me something, I would do this. But the point is, if I had a trust fund came out of nowhere, I would just keep doing this.
Yeah.
But we still worry about this. So we'll talk about some stress practices. But I guess what do you see in terms of people, and are they managing their stress, or you know, how stressed are people? Do they understand that they actually are stressed? So I'm just curious what you see.
Yeah, I think that's a great subject, and it's it feels a little kind of like crunchy to a lot of people. A lot of, you know, a lot of this feels hippie-ish. But really, when you look at the literature, you look at all the studies, it's just overwhelming how much stress is affecting us. And really, it's not just, you know, we all are gonna deal with stress. I don't think there's any way to run away from it unless we have the ability to spend some money, get a cabin in the woods, and just disconnect from everything. That's not a realistic option for most people. And so that's where stress management comes into play. More specifically, our relationship and our perception of stress. And so there's some interesting literature. There's a great TED Talk by a lady named Kelly McGonigal, who's a psychologist. And she quotes some literature for people who report on these questionnaires that they have low, medium, or high amounts of stress. And then they ask these people, do they see stress as a positive or negative thing? So they controlled for the people who had high amounts of stress and then saw stress as a negative thing. And then they compared that to people who had high amounts of stress but saw stress as a positive thing. And what we noticed from this study was that the people who had high amounts of stress and they saw stress as a bad thing, the risk of all-cause mortality jumped about 40%, right? So the risk of dying from Western disease, neurological conditions, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, drastically increased. Additionally, just, you know, their quality of life seemed to diminish. When you compare that to the people who saw stress as a positive thing, there was no change from the control group, and they tend to have similar life expectancy, they had similar prevalence of disease, and their quality of life was greatly improved, right? So it's a really interesting thing. You know, we can't necessarily help if somebody cuts us off in traffic. You know, that's gonna most likely give people a stress signal, or, you know, we can't necessarily help if there's some sort of toxic relationship at work. However, we can change our relationship and the framing of that, you know. You know, for example, if there's a toxic person at work, that's something that is out of my control. And, you know, sometimes we have to surrender to that type of stuff versus every day getting worked up in your head, kind of, you know, creating rumors and gossip about the whole situation. I mean, these are kind of toxic things that we're engaged in on that day-to-day life, but we see that when we are in this sympathetic or kind of fight or flight state, tying this back into body composition, there are 4 stress hormones that are released. There's cortisol, there's epinephrine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline. The purpose of those stress hormones is they mobilize sugar, so, you know, it's thinking that we can get away from a lion that's chasing us. So then we have cortisol, which is mobilizing blood sugar, so our blood sugar levels are raised. Going back to nutrition and training, it's going to be that much harder to effectively manipulate our body composition if we're constantly undergoing stress. My body is not worried about digesting its last meal. It's not worried about optimizing my sexual reproduction and my testosterone levels. It doesn't give a shit. It only wants us to get away from that stressor.
Yeah. So your body can, the way that I've heard this, the way I've read about this before, and I like thinking about it, is your body can either survive or it can create. And that's like one of the 2 states that it's in. So it can either be running away from something, be trying to deal with the problem, or it can be creating, it can be rebuilding your body, it can be nourishing your body, it can be having sex and reproducing. But it can't do both at once. So a lot of this comes down to just basic principles and basic mindsets, and a lot of it, it's basically everything that you're reading in like all the self-development books. They cover the same topics over and over again. But to reiterate what Jesse was saying, number one, looking at things as opportunities instead of stress. And by the way, like stress is opportunity, and stress is opportunity. Stress is in terms of exercise, it's calculated stress on the body to provoke a growth response. So stress is necessary for growth, and looking at it as an opportunity is one way. But also looking at things like, what can I control? So looking at what is within your sphere of influence and concentrating on looking at that actually expands your sphere of influence, and then you start to be able to do more. But it starts with being able to look at, okay, what can I do, and not looking at what can't I do or what can't I change. And a lot of that comes down to, again, that's kind of just developing your own personal philosophy, and reading those books. But that has a huge effect on your stress. So I guess your own personal mindset, broadly defined.
You remind me of one point about fertility in there. So I went to the zoo about 4 years ago, and we were talking with one of the zoo people, and they were talking about the zebras. And they're like, the zebras haven't been able to reproduce in the last, I forget, 5 years, let's say. So I thought that was really, really interesting, because in a way, we're in this modern zoo. We're in this technological utopia where, there's a big departure of how our genetics evolved from this hunter-gatherer tribe, tribal kind of social institution that we used to live and breathe and exist in. And now we have technology. We have these 2-ton things that we drive down these highways. I mean, we're in this whole different world, and so we're in this essentially this modern day zoo. Think about typical people who live a 9 to 5. They're in a cubicle, not moving. I mean, that's a very foreign way of living.
Right.
And so, just anecdotally, I grew up with there were 6 really close friends, and I'm the only one, or actually one other doesn't have a kid right now. But out of the 4 who had kids, 2 of those 4 had fertility issues and had to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
I know that's super anecdotal and stuff, but I think there's something there that you're finding, like our only job is to procreate, like to take my genetic potential and push it into the future. That is the only purpose of this vessel that I have right here from a biological standpoint. And when my body says, oh no, I just gotta survive, I just have to exist, that is, I think, telling us something when our body will no longer procreate. So you're seeing these canaries in the coal mines who are saying hold it, I'm so stressed out, or I'm so underslept, or something does not agree with the way that my genetics have evolved, and I am shutting things down because my body does not have the ability to effectively procreate. I think that was a really fascinating point of surviving versus, what was the other one?
Yeah, survive or create.
Creating.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
It's simple. I think that's just a simple way of looking at things. And then just one other point that I think I see about, we're still talking about stress management, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are we?
So I think that we have more stress than ever before, and thanks to being in the 21st century, we are dealing with our stress less and less because we just want to move from one distraction to the next. So usually when we are able to deal with our stress is when we aren't doing anything and our minds are forced to confront our reality and think about things and process things. But when you're moving from one distraction to the next, you're not giving your mind a chance to process things. And so we're not managing, we're not resolving the thoughts and the conflicts and the inner struggles that are going on in our mind. And so without resolving that just remains stress. We don't get to a point where, okay, I've kind of dealt with my shit and now I can move on. And if we don't actually spend time consolidating our thoughts and thinking and not distracting ourselves when those thoughts come up, then we're going to be stressed. We're going to have issues. So I like to think that, if you can't sit by yourself for 10 minutes not doing anything, that's a major fucking problem. That's bad. If you can't sit and do nothing, that means something's wrong. If you need to be able to sit and be able to connect with your thoughts and just sit there and be okay with yourself. So that's why meditation is so important. And we won't go into, if you can't sit and be okay with your thoughts, then maybe you're making some wrong life choices. We won't go into that now. But I think that's incredibly important, to just be able to sit and connect with your thoughts. And that's for me, that's what a huge thing of an aspect of stress management is. All right, so let's go into some specific practices. And so I've talked about this a lot, like how to improve your sleep. You can, and we'll go into a lot of that right now. But yeah, so many things. I mean, the basic things that you've heard, right? We've talked about minimizing light. We've talked about minimizing stress before bed. You want to make sure that you're eating the right things before bed. But most people don't really think. I would argue that most people don't have most people aren't even thinking about what they're doing in the hours leading up to bed. There are tons of people that watch TV immediately before bed, which is awful for your sleep. Even being on your phone is awful before you go to sleep. So what are some things that we can do to consciously improve our sleep? So let's just talk about some strategies for that.
So a couple of the big ones are going to be temperature, light, and then routine for me.
Cool.
So one of the key functions of sleep is to lower our basal temperature. Okay, so about 2 to 3 degrees is roughly what my body is trying to do. So we can start to help ourselves get into a good environment for falling asleep by lowering the temperature. Roughly 68 degrees is a really good starting point, if not lower than that.
Yeah.
Second thing is minimizing blue light. So if we were interacting with technology, a big one is just when people go home is they have lights everywhere. So as the sun goes down, one thing that my wife and I have done is we turn off all the lights, and we've purchased salt lamps, which are these big blocks of Himalayan sea salt, and they have just a small incandescent bulb in there, and it emits this really soft kind of chill light.
Yeah.
And you start to realize that you actually begin to get kind of sleepy in the evening times.
Right.
So
no shit.
Yeah, it's funny how it works. So when we have blue light, right, and something even as small as a cell phone charger or a computer charger in your bedroom is enough light to interfere with the melatonin production. Melatonin is essentially the sleepy hormone, is what starts to begin to make us sleepy. So in the evenings, you have melatonin starts to increase, cortisol takes a dip. That should be the natural hormonal shift that happens, and we gravitate towards bed. Now, if we have blue light, melatonin production will drop by as much as 50%, right? We can still be pushing cortisol up. So then they feel like, oh, my natural bedtime is like 11, 12 o'clock.
Right.
Think about what midnight means.
Yeah.
Middle of the night. That's when some people are saying they go to bed.
Yeah.
So I find that very, very, very fascinating. And what we found is there was some literature they took a group of guys and they put them into the wilderness in the Rockies, and they found that their bedtime was 2 to 2.5 hours earlier than what they thought their natural bedtime was. So what we're realizing is we're kind of hijacking our bodies with all this artificiality that we have in our bedrooms, in our homes, all the cell phone. You can hack that. Again, it's just a hack by having blue blockers.
So we talk about those a lot, like Swannies. You've seen me post about that, perhaps.
Yeah, so that's kind of a hack, but really it's changing that nighttime routine is a big piece of it. Okay. And then the final thing, this trumps everything. We had a great conversation leading up to this talk today. It's just routine. Going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. I get it. We live in a modern technological utopia. There are going to be times, like this weekend I was up till 2 o'clock. I was at a wedding, stone cold sober, driving a drunk girl home in Houston. It's one of those times where I am going to be up a lot later than I want to be. And you pay the price of admission, but I try to get up as close to my waking hour as I realistically could. So that routine, and I was so damn tired all of Sunday, but guess what? I had a wonderful night's sleep that next night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And so kind of what Jess was saying, I mean, basically what artificial light is doing is it's telling your body that it's still daytime. Before we had artificial light, the sun started going down, our body said, oh, the sun is going away. It's nighttime. This is when I sleep. And our body still looks at any sort of light as an indicator that the sun is still out and that you're still supposed to be awake. And it doesn't matter if it's a phone or if it's a light in your house or if it's a TV, but all of that is misconstrued as sunlight, and that prevents your body from sleeping. prevents the sleep hormone as we talked about. But really the effect of it is it prevents you from sleeping. And even if you do fall asleep, like let's say you're so tired, like let's say you binge watch a series and you stay up till like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and you're like, oh, I can't do any more, and you just pass out from exhaustion. You're getting really low quality sleep because you still had a TV preventing your body from producing melatonin all that time you were watching TV. So even though you might have fallen asleep, you'll wake up feeling really groggy the next day. So even if you are falling asleep and you're I talk with lots of people say like, oh, I watch TV a couple hours, but before I go to bed, and then after I finish my show, I'll just go to bed. And they might be actually falling asleep, but they're getting low quality sleep. So that's the issue. All right, so my strategies are, so we talked about the environment, but one other thing is blacking out things, right? So blacking out, making sure you're getting, I refuse to sleep at my girlfriend's house, not my fiance. I refuse to sleep at her house because she didn't have blackout curtains and there was a street light like right in the window. And I was like, nope, not sleeping there, can't sleep. So I actually I think I made her buy them. Blackout curtains, it's okay, we'll share bank accounts eventually. But I made her buy blackout curtains because I wanted to have a good night of sleep. Other things you can do is to minimize sound. So if you can't minimize sound, you want to have like a white noise creator of some sort. I personally wear earplugs because this one over here, this wolfhound snores like an elephant. She's off. There it is. She snores awfully, and so I have to wear earplugs or I will wake up. It was not comfortable at first, but I got used to it. So there are lots of things that you can do: sound, light, temperature. So I think my number one practice for actually minimizing or improving your sleep is creating a buffer between your workday and your non-work day. And there's a great book on this called Deep Work by Cal Newport, if you want to go into it in more detail. But basically, this is the process by which you consciously shift your body from the fight or flight state, which is happening while you're working, and shift to your rest and digest state. This is when your heart rate starts to slow down. This is when you start to relax, when you start to release muscle tension, when your body starts to feel safe. And these are all things that you need in order to sleep well. So I think the number one thing that you can do is create a buffer between your work and your non-work. One easy thing that you can do to make this happen is whatever the projects are you're working on that day, just and I do this with note index cards. I just write kind of where I left off, and then I write what the task is for the next day for each particular project. And that way I can go to bed and I don't have to worry about what I'm doing the next day. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know where I left off. I'm working in, my particular job is I'm not dealing with people at the hospital. I'm not dealing with people with a life or death situation. I make yoga videos, right? So there's not going to be a yoga emergency that comes up in the middle of the night and I have to drop everything. If the website's down, that sucks, but we'll get it back up as soon as possible. That's pretty much the worst issue that I have to deal with. So I can reasonably shut down what I'm working on and expect to come back to it in the morning and just get back to work without issues. So the point of that is just, again, figuring out where you stand with your projects, figuring out what you're gonna be doing the next day, and then being able to shut down that activity, or shut down all those activities and shift into the your rest and digest state. One thing that I like to do that kind of marks that shift is I start cooking. And so when I start cooking for the night, that's when I'm like, that's my buffer. That's like when I'm moving out of my work state and I'm just like trying to slow things down, and I'm cooking and I'm chopping things slowly and I'm calmly moving from one task to the next. If I ever notice that I'm holding a ton of tension, I'll start focusing on my breathing as I'm doing that. So I'll just really take some deep breaths and relax my shoulders as I'm exhaling. We'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of stress management, but in terms of sleep, so I like having like a buffer activity to help transfer me into my non-work day, and for me that's cooking.
One thing you may not have realized is that that's a really interesting thing. So what Dean is doing there is he's moving from this sympathetic fight or flight state into this rest and digest state. Many people see the first stage of digestion as chewing.
Yeah.
I actually see it as cooking, because when you start cooking, you start to release the aromas of whatever you're cooking. That starts to have these smells that signal to your olfactory system, okay, food is coming. Then what happens, brain perceives that, it kicks in the salivary glands, we start to secrete saliva. And that is one of the first stages, because we have something called salivary amylase, which when we put carbohydrates into our mouth, it begins the digestion process in right there in our mouth. So you're priming the pump by cooking right there. So you're putting yourself into a parasympathetic state. So I think that's really cool, because that goes into kind of what we talked about of having some sort of routine, having some sort of nighttime ritual. So I find a lot of value in, that's just his own way of doing it, but there's some really interesting points within just what Dean does there.
Yeah. And yeah, for me, it wasn't something that I consciously decided to do. This is just something that I naturally noticed helped to calm me down. So other things you can do, you want to designate certain spots in your home as non-work and work. So for me, I use my second bedroom as my office. And when I turn my light off in that bedroom and I leave, I'm not going back in there. I try to leave everything in there. I try to leave the stress of work in there. So I won't work where I try to relax. So if I sit on the couch, for example, that's me telling my body, okay, we're sitting on the couch, we're not working, we're relaxing right now. Your bedroom should only be for sex and sleeping. So again, just designating certain areas of the house. And if you don't have, I used to live in a studio apartment. I didn't have, I had one room. And so for me, it was just certain positions were different, non-work and work. So sitting at the desk was non-work. Maybe sitting on my bed while watching the computer at my desk was non-work. Sorry, so sitting at the desk was work. So you can, even if you don't have a lot of space, you can still designate certain positions as non-work and certain positions as work. And then the final thing that I want to talk about, just something you can do to improve your sleep, because I'm fitness, not movement, is doing either self-myofascial release work or doing some restorative stretching. And these are great because they're not mentally demanding. They're also not physically demanding. They help to release physical stress in our body, which helps to lead to that rest or digest state. So when you release muscle tension, or when you're focusing on deep breathing, that's helping to get you into that sympathetic state. Parasympathetic state. And so for me, practicing self-myofascial release, getting a lacrosse ball and just working out my shoulders, or doing some easy stretches is another really good way to wind down for bed. Because again, while I'm doing that, I'm practicing deep sleep, I'm releasing muscle tension, and I'm doing something that is easy, something that doesn't involve me looking at light, right? I can do that with my eyes closed pretty much, or I can do that in the dark with some very light, if any at all. I can even do that by candlelight if I want to. And that's just, for me, that's something that I recommend doing for winding down for sleep. And it's actually, we're pretty sure there have been studies done, but if you practice just 10 minutes of self-myofascial release before you go to bed, you're going to sleep better and you'll have higher sleep quality. So I would highly recommend doing that. Even if you only have I think that if you had, let's say you have 8 hours to sleep or 8 hours to be in bed, I would actually practice 10 minutes of self-myofascial release before going to bed, and then I think you'll have a higher quality of sleep, just because you primed your body for better sleep, as opposed to just dumping into bed and going straight back to, oh God, what am I going to do tomorrow? Did I do the laundry? Did I make the food? Oh crap, is the refrigerator door open? Did I lock the door? And all those things that are keeping you up. So anyways, those are my tips. All right, so let's talk about stress management. So how can we start practicing? What are your tips or some strategies for practicing stress management without making drastic changes to your lifestyle?
Yeah. So I love this thing called the 0 time concept. So how can we interject new behaviors that are going to take 0 additional time? For example, reading a book takes time. If you listen to a book on Audible when you're going to work, that takes 0 time.
Yeah.
as you're already driving to work.
Okay, yeah.
So one of the first and easiest things is changing your relationship with stress. Um, Seeing stress as a bad thing tends to be indicative of health issues. And that kind of comes from the Kelly McGonigal TED Talk. So really, I think we talked about this in, the last video is that, depression or anxiety, these things which are typically bad things, I've been anxious for periods of my life, but I see that as a positive thing. I see that I'm somehow doing something that I need to respond to, and I need to change that. That's my body's alert system saying, hey, we don't like this. This is not good. Same thing with depression. For males, that can be a lack of purpose. If I'm having a hard time, I'm lethargic in the morning, I don't want to get out of bed, that might be some low level depression, but that might be my body's alert system saying, hey, this is something that we need to tackle here. So changing your relationship with stress, I think is one of the easiest, or maybe not easiest, but it takes no additional time. So it's easy by not adding more to your day.
Yeah, you're just shifting your mindset.
Exactly. And I would highly encourage, I had some big aha moments. I'm one of the guys who I say that I run hot. I'm always kind of in my head. And so this gave me, this is probably like the beginning stage of me kind of really going into the stress management piece. And it's not something that you're going to be like, you're going to watch a TED Talk and you're good the next day.
Right.
This is going to be an intentional thing that you hold on with you and you're constantly working on for probably the rest of your life.
And it is, it's conscious. You can't just, you have to catch yourself thinking. So you have to catch yourself thinking about stress. So when you're thinking about, you'll notice it, but you have to catch yourself noticing it, right? So it's like this, it's like your second, it's like your higher self viewing your automatic self, right? So initially your mind says, oh, stress, this is a bad thing, this is ruining my day. And then you have to notice yourself saying that and say, no. This is my opportunity. How is this an opportunity for me to grow? So it doesn't happen automatically. It's just a very conscious thing. It requires effort and consciousness.
But simply out of shifting from unconscious to conscious, there's a lot that you've already made one big leap right there towards.
Just by noticing.
The second thing is the fastest way we can control our autonomic nervous system, which is what we're discussing when we talk about fight or flight and rest and digest, is through breath. And you mentioned that with your nighttime ritual when you were cooking. And so, just think about that. I'll watch, I'll be in a gym environment, I'll watch the clients that are there, and I'll notice the people who are stressed out and who aren't. And there's some people, right, I kind of see it as like a tiered system. Like, if you're relaxed, you're breathing through here. If you're kind of somewhere in the middle, you're kind of breathing through the chest. Now, if you're in code red mode, I see people breathing through their neck, which is a really interesting thing. You'll see their shoulders raise, like all these muscles start to kind of flex. So I kind of see it like you can give them like a 1, 2, or 3. 1 is here for belly breathing. The lower the number, the better. And so just again, one of my mentors, one of his big things that he gave me was intentional breathing. And sometimes people get really granular and they say, well, 3 seconds in, 3 second hold, 3 second out, 3 seconds hold. Some people have nasal breathing only, in through, left nostril, out through, all these different things. And really just by being aware of your breathing pattern, that can be 3 breaths right before you have a meal, that can be as you're driving to work, you take a 25 intentional breaths. Just the intentionality starts to regulate your nervous system and can start to push you into more of a rest and relaxed state. There's a lot of literature, we've been doing this for 5,000 to 8,000 years, conscious breathing. And this is a big cornerstone, if I'm not mistaken, within your practice in yoga.
So actually, this is something that we talk about a lot in the next program that we're doing, the Strength Foundations program that I'm starting next week. We're going to be teaching you how to integrate breath with movement, but actually that starts with just practicing breathing in general. Just as breathing helps you with stress management and stress relief, it can also help assist your fitness. And so that's going to be something that we practice. And something that's really cool about that is that it translates over into everything. So just by practicing yoga, just by practicing breathing while you're doing yoga, even though you're doing that within the sphere of fitness, that does translate over into other things that you do.
Absolutely.
which is really cool. And I wanted to, so do you want to demonstrate belly breathing?
Yeah, so I think it would be just as simple as fashion is to place one hand here on your chest, place another hand here on your belly. And then the first thing I have people do is only breathe through this top hand. So we'll just do that for one breath. Right, I'm only breathing right here through my lungs, okay? I wanna do another breath, and I wanna see if we can only, and this isn't easy for everybody, but can I only make this bottom hand move? Okay, we're gonna do that for one breath.
Oh, I'm good at that. I'm relaxed. Just saying.
And even just one breath right there, I mean, I feel like I let go of a little tension up here.
Mhm.
Sometimes you'll see, right, a lot of people hold tension in different parts of their body, and you'll actually start to see shoulders lower, or you'll start to see like their brow, right, which was furrowed before,
Mhm.
start to relax. So you'll instantly see the impact on their internal state,
Mhm.
right? And it's a powerful yet so simple thing,
Mhm.
because breathing could be both conscious and unconscious, and we need more intentionality behind that breath.
Yeah. And so, and also just one more thing on the belly breathing. I think the easiest way to do it. So sitting is one way, but if you want and if you have the space, lay down and just put your hand on your stomach and just focus on puffing your stomach out. It's gonna feel like really silly at first, and I know some outdated fitness articles will tell you like keep your stomach tucked in, which is nonsense. So you actually do want to like stick out your belly as much as like try to give yourself a food baby, and that's actually. This is strength, being able to give yourself a food baby. So if you look at like, I remember this one gymnast from this kid who was a gymnast at a camp that I went to. It looked like he had a bloated belly. He looked like, he had a bloated belly from starvation, or I'm ignorant, so I'm just admitting it, but it looked like he had a bloated belly. And it was actually that was just his stomach muscles, because he could push out so much. So anyways, lie on your back, put your hand on your stomach, try to inflate your stomach as much as possible, and then squeeze it all out, belly button to spine. And practicing that's really gonna help. What was your last point?
Yeah, and so the analogy for the last one is, so play, is we can see this example best exemplified within kids. And so recently,
And young adults.
So recently I was at a playground and I noticed this kid who we were with. He went up to some random kid and just kind of did just that,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of interesting. I instantly kind of like smiled when I did it. I caught myself. And so when that happened with this kid, the other kid who didn't know him, instead of just being like, dude, who are you? Why'd you do that, right? He gave chase and chased the other kid, and then this foot race of tag began, right? And then next thing you know, they're like telling stories, and they're like, I don't even know what they're doing. They're like gesticulating all around and smiling. And I thought that was such a really cool thing, because that is a kid's natural stress relieving valve, is to play, okay? And we lose that ability when we lock ourselves into this modern day zoo.
Yeah.
And so playing's different for everybody, right? That is here with Tron, and we just have a good time, and I rub his ears,
Right.
Right? Or maybe I'm with a buddy and we're just talking and we're moving, and it's that type of uncontrollable laughter that you can't even control. You make the ugliest face in the world. Maybe it's a forced vacation, where you play by disconnecting from all the stresses of real life, and you're out of town maybe once a quarter. Playing is different for everybody, but I would investigate that and play every single day.
Yeah.
Right? That could be just being silly with your wife in the kitchen.
Right.
That can be pushing somebody for no reason.
Right. And the funny thing about it is, like, play is something that we had to play is something very natural to us, but it's something that all of us unlearned, because we live in a very, this society that we live in is very unfriendly to play. So there are a lot of great resources on play. I'm totally blanking on who the author is, but there is a book on playing, like, that teaches adults how to play again. And I can't remember some of the factors. If anybody's watching this and they know what I'm talking about, please comment and let me know what this is. But a big factor of play is just unstructured. So
it's creative, it's free.
Yeah, it's something free, creative, exactly. So if if someone's watching this and they're familiar with what it is, please let me know so I can direct people to it. But yeah, play is. Anyways, all right, so I want to get into my 3 things, and I want to be quick. Edward, what time is it?
153.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna try and do this quickly. So we want to give my favorite 3 strategies for stress management. Number 1 is meditation, and I'm not saying that because I'm a yoga instructor. I'm saying that because meditation is incredibly important for your mental health. As I was talking about before, I think everybody should be able to sit down, and everyone who's mentally sound and who is mentally healthy, I know there are a lot of people who aren't in that state, so I can't speak for everyone. But if you are mentally healthy, I think you should be able to sit down. You should be able to just sit with your thoughts for 10 minutes. Meditation can be very simple. I'm going to give you the way that I do it. So here's my internal dialogue for when I meditate. Okay, I'm going to sit down here. I'm in a cross-legged position. It doesn't have to be in a cross-legged position. This is just how I feel comfortable with meditating. I'm gonna make sure that my chest is upright. I wanna feel my abs somewhat tight and engaged, and I'm just going to breathe. So I'm inhaling. I notice my chest expanding, and I'm exhaling. I notice my chest relaxing. I'm inhaling. Notice my chest lifting, and I'm exhaling, feeling my shoulders relax. And I just keep doing that. And now at some point, I start thinking about something and start thinking about work. What I do then? I acknowledge that I'm thinking about work. I'm like, oh, what am I doing today? What should I do tomorrow? I need to work on that one thing tomorrow. Oh, I'm thinking about work. Okay, you're thinking about work. Now stop thinking about work. Go back to thinking about your breath. Okay, I'm inhaling, and then I'm exhaling. And that's it. That's what meditation is for me. It's just noticing my breath and noticing when I'm not noticing my breath and going back and noticing my breath. So meditation is super simple. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to know about all 7 chakras. I don't even know how many chakras there are. That gives you an idea of how much involved I am in this kind of stuff. Are there 7? 6? 8? Someone knows.
7 sound correct.
7 sounds, okay. All right. So meditation is number 1, and just again, taking even 5 minutes at first, working away. I think 10 minutes is for me, 10 minutes is the minimum. Working away up to 15 minutes is desirable. And again, I think it's very important to come to terms with your thoughts and just be able to sit there and think. The second thing is what I like to do is kind of what I'll refer to as buffer activities. So these are the things that I will do when I can't go straight to meditating, because you can't always go straight to meditating, especially if you're stressed. So try going straight into a meditation when you're super stressed about work. It doesn't work. It just doesn't happen. So what I like to do is kind of buffer activities for that. So I'll go for a walk. I'll go for an easy, like, just dip in the water. This is not exercise. I don't want you to confuse this with fitness. I'm just going for an easy walk. It's not structured fitness. I'm going for a dip in the water, or I'm reading a book. And these things usually help me transition to the point where I can start to relieve stress, where I can practice meditation. And these things in and of themselves are also good stress relievers because they take me out of my head and into the activity. And what you want to focus on while you're doing these kind of things is getting involved in being present. Now, being present is something that everyone talks about. What does it mean? It just simply means that you're paying attention to what you're doing and not getting involved in other things. So if I'm reading a book, I'm trying to think about whatever I'm reading, and I'm trying to really understand that concept, or I'm trying to get inside. If you're reading fiction, I'm trying to get in the head of the characters. If you're taking a walk, it means noticing what's around you. I prefer to walk in nature or on a trail, and I'll look at the trees, I'll look at the water, I'll watch my dogs do whatever they do. But even if you're in the city, you can also just watch what's going on in the city. Like, watch what are people doing. What do the buildings look like? What are the cars doing? I hope you watch what the car's doing just so you don't get hit. But the point is, you're just noticing things and being there and not trying to let your mind wander and think about things that aren't there, not in the moment. And then if I had to give you one more strategy in addition to meditation and then just buffer activities to help, I think journaling is an incredible activity. Just organizing your thoughts, and actually more than journaling, kind of building on that, is writing. So when you are, when you're thinking about something that really bothers you, or you're thinking about something that really has a strong impact on you, maybe you read something in a book and you're trying to relate it to your life, I find that taking taking some time to write out your thoughts about that subject and then organize it into a comprehensive argument. So basically writing an essay, or writing, basically writing a blog. For me, that's extremely stress relieving, extremely satisfying, because I'm taking disorder and I'm giving it order. I'm taking disordered thoughts and I'm taking my own internal dialogue, I'm finding an answer for it, and I'm relieving that issue, right? I'm relieving that problem. So for me, writing is an incredibly important tool that I really enjoy employing for stress relief. And that's something that I've talked about in my off and that emails, and it's something that I've resolved to do much more of now that I've stopped doing it, but something that I plan on doing on a weekly basis now. All right, so anything to add?
I think the only thing to add is that a lot of times see meditation is the kind of the way you described it, like cross-legged sitting, Zen. But I think meditation, I don't see as much of a difference between the walking and the meditation, because what you described to me was a form of meditation.
Sure.
I'm observing my dogs doing whatever they do. I'm in nature. Right. I'm trying to be present. I come back to the breath. That is meditation, albeit we're moving. So I think, there might be some, I think we kind of said the same thing with breath, meditation, and walking. To me, we can separate them, but I see these things as very much converging. So that might be, one way of looking at it, because some people who are watching this may be stressed out and be like, there's no way I can add anything. And so something as simple as like, maybe you can cross off 3 of these off your list by going for a walk, trying to be present, and then counting 25 intentional breaths.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I made the distinction is because I just think meditation, when you don't have any distraction, like when you're walking, there's other things going on. Meditation forces you to be really present because there's nothing else going on. Like there's nothing else distracting you. But again, like if you're not there yet, or if you don't have, maybe meditation isn't for you, using those buffer activities and absolutely walking. Ryan Holiday, one thing Ryan Holiday he's an Austin-based author. He's written books. By the way, The Obstacle is the Way is written by Ryan Holiday, and it's kind of talks about what we talked about today in terms of looking at things as obstacles. Looking at obstacles as opportunities, or looking at stress as opportunities, and kind of changing your mindset. So that's a great book to check out. But he wrote a blog once in which he says, like, you don't need to meditate, you just need to go for a walk. And agreed, similar, but anyways, cool. So that was that's it, right?
That's it.
All right, cool. So we went over sleep. So improving your sleep, not just the number of hours that you're sleeping. Oh, we didn't talk about the number of hours you should be sleeping, but basically it's about 8. Everything you read is going to say everything you say is going to be between like 7.5 and 9. But the thing is, you want to have at least 7.5 hours of actual sleep, which means
you might be in bed for like 8.5 hours sometimes.
Right. I mean, if you fall asleep really quickly, 8 hours. Right.
Yeah.
But
to give you some perspective, last night I got a ton of sleep. For me, I got 7 hours and 26 minutes of sleep. I was in bed for 10.5 hours. I've got poor sleep, right? Because entrepreneurs, we're in our heads a lot. So this is something that is a big thing for all you corporate level people, entrepreneurs. I think this is really the pertinent issue, because this leads to everything else. And let's just kind of go through the chain. If I'm highly stressed, it's going to be really difficult to get that great night of sleep. One night of poor sleep puts me into a state of insulin resistance. So then all the nutritional things that I'm trying to do aren't as effective. And then I've got a stressor on top of a stressor on top of a stressor. And then I'm trying to do some sort of HIIT interval session with heavy weights. Like it's just capacity. Yeah, it's just not intelligent. So I hope what we did over the course of the last 5 weeks was shift your paradigm a little. With all these granular things that we were talking about. And that's kind of was one of my big hopes is, there's nothing worse than trying to deprive yourself of more calories, work harder, and just try to have more willpower than the next person. It just doesn't work. And I
Yeah.
deal with those people who've been doing that for 30 years and they're frustrated, hormones are out of whack. So hopefully, by doing less but doing the right things, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So if you're not exactly where you want to be and you don't quite have the body composition that you're looking for, but these principles applied effectively and consistently will drastically change your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as much as we just want to sit here and talk about, like, lift this, eat that, don't do this, it really does come down to making sure that you have a positive mindset. God, I hate that phrase. What I'm trying to say is it really does come down to making sure that you have a personal philosophy that's effective, and that the decisions that you make are coming from sound principles, and they're coming from an effective mindset or guidelines or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, and by the way, if you guys want us to do more of these, leave a comment below and talk about maybe some potential topics we could cover. The plan initially was just to do a few weeks of this, do 5 weeks, and talk about just kind of what we talked about: building muscle, losing fat, and
Stress and sleep.
and proper fitness and nutrition, and how all that works together.
Yeah.
But if you guys have other topics that you might want us to talk about, maybe we get more specific into strength training, maybe.
Grow your biceps. Ooh.
Right. And pull-ups.
Maybe not.
Yeah, so if you guys have ideas, let us know. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for coming on again, Jesse.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Make sure you guys follow Central Athlete on Facebook.
Feel free to connect with me. There were a couple questions recently in the comment pages that I just now realized, so I shot a couple messages to some of you guys. So feel free. I love that type of stuff. Tag Jesse O'Brien, Central Athlete. I'll come find that stuff, and maybe I can provide some resources or be kind of a supporting mechanism for anybody who has questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just for you guys watching, the Manfully Oak Strength Foundations course is starting Monday, July 9th. Last day to sign up is July 8th. So the members area enrollment is ending. You will not be able to sign up for the members area after July 8th. So if you want to get in that program, it's my favorite program ever that I've ever made. I think it's incredibly useful for anybody. And I hate saying like this program is for everybody, but everybody needs proper muscle activation. Everybody needs to have correct movement patterns, and most people aren't doing them. So I don't care if you've been working out for 10 years or 10 days, this program is going to make you better and more efficient at working out. And that'll be, I'll put a link in the comments here, or just go to the website, manfullyyoga.com. Cool, all right, I'm out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.
All right.